special session of this meeting. We will be first starting with Working Group 1 on manufacturing and trafficking. I have a few administrative announcements to get us started. First, I want to thank all of you colleagues for your participation in the Global Coalition meetings over the past 6 months. We now have over 1,500 participants from 149 countries, and we have had 70 hours of sub-working group meetings. Today's session will focus on discussing progress that has been made over the past 6 months since the last working group meeting, which took place in September. We are going to review the draft recommendations, and we are going to invite comments before these recommendations are posted on the website. Now, please note that governments do not need to adopt all the recommendations, and also governments can adopt recommendations outside of the ones that we are sharing today and officially on the website. If there is time for additional discussion and we don't make it through all of the recommendations, no worries. We can continue discussing these in April at our next sub-working group session. Additionally, we are going to begin implementing the initiatives in April as well, and we'll be discussing some of this at the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, the CND, which is coming up in a couple of weeks as well, where we'll have a special meeting on the coalition's work. So please continue to visit the website and please identify initiatives of interest. If you have forgotten where that is, here's a screenshot of our website. You'll see the initiatives tab that is circled. If you click on that and start scrolling down, you will see many different initiatives or activities, and then you can click and open one of them. You'll see descriptions, backgrounds, and again, at the very bottom, you'll see the point of contact if you are interested in signing up and registering to participate in any one of those initiatives. So that is all for me for now. And what I would like to do is turn it over to our working group chairs. We have now from the East region for Working Group 1, from New Zealand, Greg Williams, and from India, Gyaneshwar Singh. Over to you, colleagues, for your moderation of today's session. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much, Morales. Now, this is the meeting for Group 1. Respected co-chairs of working group and sub-working group of distinguished member states of this global coalition, Mr. Brian Morales, Ms. Sarah Finmore, Mr. Bill McGlynn, and other distinguished members who are organizing this coalition group. A very good morning, good afternoon to all of you. I am Gyaneshwar Singh, Deputy Director General, Narcotics Control Bureau of India, and I'm looking after operations, enforcement, and coordination activities at Narcotics Control Bureau India. First of all, I would like to welcome all the delegates of member states to this midterm coalition working group meeting. I convey my sincere thanks to the chair for this working group for giving me this opportunity. This is a privilege for me to be co-chair of this working group, one that is Global Coalition to address the threats of synthetic drugs. It is a great stride taken by United States in uniting all the member countries to fight against increasing menace of synthetic drugs and precursor chemicals. I understand that the trends of drug trafficking, modus operandi, and prevalence of drugs vary from country to country owing to regional dynamics. However, despite these variations, the fundamental challenge posed by drug trafficking and drug abuse remains the same for all the member states. Likewise, trafficking in synthetic drugs and precursor chemicals affect all of us. Hence, it can be said that only international cooperation through exchange of information, sharing of best practices, coordination action, etc., any tangible results in our fight against drug trafficking and drug abuse can only be achieved through concentrated efforts. It is a matter of satisfaction that in this forum of global coalition, all the participating countries are on the same page and we share the same concern to work out effective solutions. I've been keenly following all the meetings of sub-working group 1.1 and 1.2 related to manufacture and trafficking of synthetic drugs, which are being conducted for the last 5 months. And I must say that deliberations made during these meetings were extremely useful. Synthetic drug trafficking remained highly profitable for the drug trafficker and equally challenging for law enforcement agencies. Such scenarios demand that broader management cooperation need to be complex, volatile, and technologically driven world. This would be possible only if the bordering countries prioritize border management and information exchange to counter drug trafficking. The Interpol's plan to lead a global synthetic drug operation in 2024, emphasizing the need for international cooperation and information sharing to combat the growing threat of synthetic drugs, looks promising, and all the member states need to work hard hand in hand. The challenge faced by some of the countries in long-term
And
storage
Mr.
of...
Singh, my sincerest apologies. Stand by. Mr. Singh, my sincerest apologies. Interpreters are asking you to slow down, please. Thank you.
Okay. The challenges faced by some of the countries in long-term storage of seized chemicals should be addressed. The need for development of a process of rapid disposal of seized material is the need. Such disposal mechanism should be compliant to the established norm of environmental protection. Precursor chemicals can be described as the backbone for manufacture of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. Hence, such precursor chemicals are trafficked globally. Therefore, controlling the diversion and trafficking in precursor chemical is in fact a way to control the trafficking in drugs. The concept of establishing a chemical action task force may also be looked into so that the best framework may be made available to the member state as per their national requirements. Like my colleague, Ms. Monica Ashish Batra, Deputy Director General, co-chair, Sub-Working Group 1.1 earlier said that it was a high time that utmost importance should be laid upon precursor chemicals, and there is an urgent requirement for robust regulatory mechanism by all member states such that trafficking and law enforcement becomes efficient. Drug law enforcement agencies of all member states should make best usage of INCB online systems, that is PICS, Ionix, PEN, etc. There is also a need to be an effective monitoring mechanism over the online platform and social media where these substances are advertised and sold through proper legislations. Due to ever-evolving technological advancement, which are being abused by drug trafficking network by means of darknet, cryptocurrency, encrypted social media application, it is also need of the hour for creating awareness for social media platform and also train the drug law enforcement agency officers and keep them updated with technology. It is equally important also to train parcel courier and logistics services through which the drugs are transported through concealment. I'm also eager to know more and work upon the engagement initiatives plans being rolled out where the civil society, university, and the private entities are to be involved. These entities can play an important role in containing the threat of drug trafficking and drug abuse. Hopefully, with the contribution of all member states, we would be successful in implementing recommendation at the right place. I'm hopeful that this working group meeting would be beneficial for all the member states. The outcome of deliberations of draft recommendation would benefit all of us. I look forward to the exchange of more experiences and ideas by all the member countries in future working group and sub-working group meetings. These upcoming exchanges of views and best practices with concentrated effort by all the member states would pave way for containing the threat of synthetic drugs and precursors effectively. Thank you so much. Over to my colleague from New Zealand.
All right, can you hear me? Is it working? Right, brilliant. Well, Mr. Singh, I just want to thank you for everything you've just raised here. I think it's no great surprise you're right on the money in terms of your views, and I think you're absolutely supported by me in the view of the need now to actually look at a CADF type regime across the world around precursor chemicals, because I think the extent of the harm, the fact that a number of countries' social fabric and the way in which they operate and function are actually being massively damaged the corruption and endemic sort of issues that are occurring are just phenomenal. That is all really coming off the reality of the expansion of the production of synthetic drugs, primarily driven off diversion of chemicals. So I absolutely agree with you, and we totally support it from our perspective around what you're saying. And there's been quite a bit of work that we've done in the background here around looking at what that regime might actually look like, and some great work with INCB in discussion with that. Brian, first off, I would just want to thank the US State Department really in starting and getting this initiative going. And I think it's a pretty stunning thing, a piece of work that you've actually done here, because really, as you can see over the sort of last 5 to 6 years, if not longer, but really particularly in that time, we're all suffering. All these countries, all the countries of this initiative are massively suffering from this impact of transnational crime and what's happening with synthetic precursors. And as you know, we're learning here, even though we work in this area day in and day out, what we're seeing through the work that we've done over the last sort of 4 months is understanding there's a massive amount of initiatives, projects, pieces of work being done through UNODC and other agencies that we can actually all tap into and learn and understand and work better. And I think the aim for us, and the way I love the way the website's set up, because we can really dive into the initiatives part now. And I've got a project running here to actually get the tiger by the tail, to understand what all these things are and how best we can use them here. And I mean, we have, you know, in some respects, we're reasonably advanced in a lot of this, but there's a massive opportunity. So I want to thank you and your team for the commitment and the drive that you put in your end. And like I said to you right from the beginning, this has got to be the purpose of all this is to think big and go big and really make definitive changes off the back of this. So I want to thank you for that. I think in terms of the recommendations, and you're right, Mr. Singh, particularly, I think some of the real strength actually is recommendations 1.1 around the manufacture and precursors part of the business. So we absolutely support the work you're talking about, particularly in support of Southeast Asia and into the Pacific Islands, because they are all getting smashed with the massive amount of both precursors being seized, but also drugs, seizures, and real corruption and affecting populations in those areas. So we really support that. I think I'll leave it to Anthony sort of to talk about some of the stuff around the trafficking side of it. But I guess the point now is the rubber's hitting the road really off these initiatives and the recommendations. And talking to you, Brian, I think the other key thing is that getting that sort of agreement around potential funding that might be sitting there and how we allocate that is probably going to be the most important thing out of all of these. Like anything, I think the point is I'm kind of a doing person. I love the talking piece, but now we're at the point where the rubber hits the road. And, you know, like me down here, I'm pushing across the Pacifics with the teams that work there. And I've just talked to Anthony about AFP in there into the Pacific to really see how we can enhance these initiatives and get these things going. And no doubt that's a critical component for the Asian components too. So I think that's where we're at. I think the aim of this is to agree to these initiatives and recommendations, and take into account, you know, as we work through that there are also going to be other opportunities as we go. So that's kind of what I've got to say at the moment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you. Now, I'd like to invite the co-chairs of Sub-Working Group 1.1, Manufacturing of Synthetic Drugs and Their Precursors, from India, Monica Shish Batra, and from Kazakhstan, Dulat Mukametrakimov, to provide their comments and presentation of how the working groups have worked these past months. Thank you.
Да, доброе утро всем. Как меня
Good
слышно?
morning. Can you hear me? Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Dulad, go ahead, please.
Да, еще раз всех приветствую.
One more time, greetings to all of you.
От Республики Казахстан.
On behalf of the Republic of Kazakhstan,
Хочу поздравить
first of all, I would like to congratulate
с наступающим праздником.
all the women with the holiday,
Вы знаете, что это
March the 8th. You probably know this. It's the International Women's Day.
так скажем, всего мира.
and all the world celebrates. As far as we're concerned, we'd like to wish to our girls, our wives, our mothers, all the best, good health, and always be by our side and gladden our hearts with their beauty. I would like to congratulate everybody with the holy Ramadan festival. Also, I would like to say that during the 6 months, as my colleague just pointed out, a lot of work has been carried out in terms of exchanging experiences and dealing with most serious issues pertinent to precursors and drugs and the ways of disposing them. It's the acids, bromketone, and others. The speaker just spoke, mentioned a very good thing. It's time we moved to action from merely speaking. I think that's a very good initiative. I've always been on the practical side of the matters, and I would like to call on all the participants of a global coalition, given the fact that narcotics and their substances have no borders and their spread and trafficking has been observed all over the world. Given all that, we have a platform where we've been discussing all the painful points. Over 149 countries have been participating. Let's fight together. I would like to thank all the participants, all the speakers, all the co-chairs of all the countries of the world who have spoken, presented their slides with so much vigor and interest, and everything that has been mentioned today has been tackled. I think we try to implement everything in our Republic of Kazakhstan, try to transfer your experience of dealing with these matters to our personnel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I don't see Monica Shishpatra here, but I'll see if there's anyone standing in for her from NCB or the Indian government who'd like to say a few words. If not, we are happy to read the recommendations. Okay, well, we can read the recommendations for working group, sub-working group 1.1. I will read them slowly so that the interpreters can interpret, and then we will then just open it up and let our working group co-chairs take any comments and questions or thoughts from the group, and then we'll move on to sub-working group 1.2. So the recommendations for sub-working group 1.1 are: first, engage the chemical and other relevant industries in key chemical manufacturing and trading countries to promote the cooperation on a voluntary basis with the industry and trade to address diversion of chemicals, adoption of industry standards to address the diversion of chemicals and precursor chemicals, and related manufacturing equipment that can be expanded within domestic industries and to additional countries. The red text that you see there is text that came in over the weekend, since this was the last version that was sent in black before this meeting. So that's what the red text is. The second sub-working group recommendation: improve identification and detection of synthetic drugs, including their precursors, through capacity building for laboratory and law enforcement personnel, in particular designer precursors, through better equipment and awareness raising for law enforcement and judiciary. Third, improve investigation and dismantling of clandestine laboratories through the development of the appropriate normative framework, training, and technical assistance for law enforcement, forensic laboratories, prosecutors, and judges. And finally, increase disposal or repurposing of precursor chemicals and synthetic drugs by adopting national disposal plans and delivering training and technical assistance to national authorities. So those are the four sub-working group 1.1 recommendations. I think that's all of them. So now I'll turn it back to our co-chairs if they have any. Oh, sorry, there are a few more. These also were additional ones that came in that are unnumbered. To explore the possibility of establishing a counter-illicit drug manufacturing action task force focused on preventing the diversion of chemicals and manufacturing equipment. That's what Greg was mentioning just now. To expand the scheduling to address designer drug precursors, substances which are purpose-made to circumvent the list of controlled substances and have no known legal use. And finally, to expand naloxone availability and access, including training for first responders involved in dismantling of clandestine laboratories to offset possible exposure. I think that is all. If not, we can go to the last slide. No, this is it. Just these two slides. Okay, very good. So now I'll turn it back to Mr. Singh and Mr. Williams to see if there are any comments from the group.
Do you mind, Mr. Singh, if I just make a comment? So Antonio and I from INCB have looked at, I think, number 2, which also becomes the one over the page that you talked about. This is the CADEV concept. I'll just paste this.
Yeah, well. In India, the industry has adopted voluntary code of conduct for transportation and shipment inside the country, and Narcotics Control Bureau monitors their movement. These entities dealing in any kind of activity such as manufacturing, possession, sale, purchase, etc., is required to obtain a unique registration number from NCB. Even the intermediary entities, that is B2B and social media companies, who post the ads listing on their portals for their sale, purchase, and other activities are also required to obtain URN. So this way, we regulate the movement of chemicals and precursors. Thank you.
Okay, Brian, can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry, we can hear you now. And also just to note that I've paused the recording for the discussion phase as well. Thank you.
Sorry, I keep jumping across to mute for some reason. So I just want to explain in terms of point 2 and the one you talked about over the page, which is the one about establishing the Counterintelligence Manufacturing Action Task Force. I've just posted it if you have a look, working with Antonio. What we're recommending, what I've put in there is the establishment of a Chemical Action Task Force, CADEV, to examine, develop and implement new approaches and measures to address the diversion of chemicals and essential equipment used to manufacture illicit drugs causing massive social harm across the world. It was kind of the two of us coming together and sort of coalescing both of those. I think that I can just, in terms of Antonio's view and mine on this, is a little bit of divergence, just so you're aware, is he talked about this being on a voluntary basis. My view is we're way past that sort of level of work with the chemical industry. And that's where we put stuff up to you, and we're happy to share the document that was done down here to give it an idea of what this looks like in terms of what the regime looks like. But I think we're kind of trying to push for something that really looks like FATF. But to do that too, I think really what you need to do is, it's kind of interesting. Like, I sent you up the Jardif West stuff about sort of shows what's happening in Southeast Asia, and I know UNADC's done some kind of good reporting around Southeast Asia. We kind of need a sort of a global perspective of really what this is all about in terms of the harm, because it's trillions and trillions of dollars that's been impacted. As I said, you've got narco states, you've got countries sort of falling over, the social fabric of those countries is sort of falling to pieces and parts, significant corruption. And I think, to be honest, if we're kind of moving towards a CADEF type regime, then we have to have the evidence-based sort of research that fits behind it. Because I think, Brian, we're trying to push to something that is sort of almost like what happened with FATF around the G7 decisions. So this is almost got to be pushed up through a political regime here to make this thing happen in that sense. everything else in here, all the other elements to this that are in the recommendations are absolutely 100% on the money and should be absolutely supported as well. But as I said, and I think Mr. Singh understands too, is a lot of that is reactionary stuff to what is the biggest problem. So that I think that's, and we'd be interested in hearing views from other countries about what they think, and I'm obviously interested in Mr. Singh's sort of view on that as well.
Anybody from the member country who would like to speak?
I see Anthony Conway has his hand up. Anthony, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Sarah. Absolutely in support of the recommendation around a CADF regime. My question, it's a question and a comment really to the chairs. I note that there is in brackets on a voluntary basis. My experience with the private sector is that when something's voluntary, for commercial reasons, there's less likely to be maximum participation. Would it not be better that we be seeking, given the support that we've got behind this global coalition at the highest levels of government, that we be pushing for a compulsory basis, and when that occurs, the private sector create their own internal what's the term I'm looking for? Compliance departments to ensure that they're complying with legislation. I think that we risk undercooking this CADF concept if we make it on a voluntary basis. That's it from me.
So just to be clear, the one that I read out, which I've added, if you have a look in the chats, I'm suggesting supersedes Initiative 2 and the one over the page, which is the Counter Illicit Manufacturing Action Task Force. That's what I'm pushing for here in terms of the initiatives.
Hello. May I add something?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes,
Can you
please
hear
go
me?
ahead.
Yeah. On the first draft recommendation, I would like to say that the cooperation done by the chemical industries are of voluntary nature. And can there be some sort of sub-recommendations can be there? So how to achieve these recommendations? We are focusing on these draft recommendations. Can we have some steps, or we have sub recommendations that may pave way for achieving these recommendations? Can we suggest something? Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Whether I was clear?
And Ravi, it is my understanding that Greg was not able to hear you. Can you please try to
Oh.
repeat what you said and speak
Yeah.
closer to the microphone, and we'll see if that
Sure,
helps.
sure.
Thank you so much.
Once again, I was telling that achieving these recommendations on the first recommendations, the participation of industries is important, and the participation should be of voluntary nature. That is the key of the first draft recommendation. So I was asking whether we would like to draft some recommendations, that these recommendations could be of sub-recommendations type. So they are guiding the chemical industries to further expand their standards that could help in diversion of the precursor chemicals. So whether we should go for such type of recommendations. Are we planning to draft such type of sub-recommendations that could help the chemical industries to adopt some new recommendations? Whether I was clear? in putting my point.
Oh, thanks, Ravi. Look, I think the point of this with what the wording says is it's sort of like a project, isn't it? You know, I think the point is, if we say, look, we think we should work towards something that looks like this, I think we all agree that there needs to be some sort of regime over the chemical industry. I think the point is, if we say this is an initiative, then I think it's its own working group. It's almost a piece of work that has to occur across both the western and eastern part of the world, and sort of reaching towards what we say this thing ultimately should look like. So there will be views, as you have, around whether or not it could be a voluntary basis with chemical industry or not. And I think that's the purpose of being able to sit down and work through in a logical way what we're currently doing. So what does it look like currently in terms of what we do with industry now? And then taking into account what the FATF regimes look like, and how they were implemented, and seeing how that would work, because there's a bit of both ways. Under the FATF regime, which I'm well versed on, there is relationship building with industry, with the financial sectors, and a lot of work goes on with them in terms of training and also support of those financial sector companies to help them to fit the criteria that they need to fit, and also support into countries as well. So absolutely, there's no way you wouldn't run this unless the chemical industry was involved in it. And I think that would be a key component. And as you develop this whole sort of program of work, does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense, because already there are some standards that are being adopted by the industries, but I think we should study some recommendations of some member states, and thereafter we may plan for drafting such type of suitable sub recommendations on this draft recommendations. That may be helpful in studying the other recommendations, and for planning to see any loopholes in any such guidelines or any such standards being adopted by the industries. That was I was thinking about this only.
No, and I really appreciate that. I mean, there's a lot of expertise already happening across the world in interaction with chemical industry. And I think, look, there's a document that I prepared that maybe it would be worth sending, that's come from a FATF expert that sort of applies it across what we're thinking in this regime piece. And it's really quite a nice document because it talks about the various elements and what the outcomes might look like. We might share that, but I think if we get off the basis today, if we agree that this is an action, then the natural bit would be to move into a working group type environment to progress it.
Thank you.
Okay. Have we got any other comments from anyone else?
And a friendly reminder from your technical moderator that if you want to raise a hand, you need to go to reactions and the raise hand button is going to be there.
Point number 3. Kindly mute your mic if you're not speaking, please. Right. Am I audible now? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Regarding point number 3. So we are really thankful to DEA, USDEA for their contribution. They have organized some valuable training programs in India on detection and dismantling of clandestine labs. So we had series of programs and we have really benefited out of it. And as far as investigations go, I'm glad to share that on the basis of input provided by New Zealand and Australia, we have dismantled one group which was exporting precursors to New Zealand and Australia, pseudoephedrine, and we have arrested 3 people from Tamil Nadu, and their kingpin is on the run. So we'll be able to bust this entire network, which was which has supplied about 45 consignment worth about 3,500 kilos of pseudoephedrine to New Zealand and Australia. So I'm glad that our investigations are going well. And as far as disposal of precursor chemicals and synthetic drugs are concerned, in India, we have adopted a drive. For past 18 months, we are into a mission mode of destroying all the drugs, including precursors. And I'm happy to share the figure that about 1.4 million kilos of drugs, including precursors, have been destroyed by all these state agencies and NCB in India. Thank you.
And I just want to congratulate India on your great work there and taking out the group there, which is phenomenal. I think the only other thing, Brian, I think for the group to understand here, when we're talking about destruction and that aid, having a talk to you, there is some funding sitting in available aid. Am I right with that, around that might be used or allocated to assist some countries around particularly destruction of drugs?
Yes, so there are resources that that we're looking at, and other donors will look at in terms of operationalizing the coalition's work. So we are very interested in seeing the recommendations and what initiatives countries are interested in participating in. That one of them being the destruction of chemicals. Yeah.
So is it your view then? I'm kind of talking to you. I mean, obviously I'm sitting down here in New Zealand, and our intent is we're trying to work now across the Pacific. Is it a case of who do you see sort of coordinating a response for, say, Southeast Asia? Do you want, is that like Mr. Singh up there looking across, working with that, or UNDC, or how do you want that to work? Because I think what we have to do for this area is look at those two areas, don't we, and go like, and get sort of a coordinated response back up to you. Is that what you want to see?
Sorry. Yes. Thanks for the question, Greg. So these recommendations will then to be operationalized with actions or policies or initiatives, which can be global programs, for example. So the international organizations have identified about 120 global initiatives, which we have been posting on the website, as I mentioned earlier, on the initiatives section. So one option is for countries to go on the initiatives page, identify which initiative might be of interest, such as clandestine laboratory training, or chemical destruction, or forensic capabilities, or canine drug detection training, or what have you. There's a full list there. And then they can directly reach out to the international organizations and say, we would like to participate in this World Customs Organization initiative, or UNODC, or INCB, or what have you. Another option would be if at the domestic level, at the national level, your agencies are carrying out work in support of the recommendation, you can directly come to us and say, we are interested, or we are doing X, Y, and Z in support of this recommendation and that recommendation, and we'll be documenting all of that over the coming months as well. So you can join an international initiative. You can just represent what you're doing already nationally at the national level in support of the coalition's objectives, or you can do both. But we'll in a sense be capturing that information over the coming months from all of you. In the case of your recommendation specifically on the CATF, the Chemical Action Task Force, I've spoken to INCB, which has a mandate very much aligned with that, and they said that the process would be to have a sort of an exploratory process within INCB of carrying that out, of tasking it. There used to be a CATF in the late 1990s, DEA established and then passed that mandate, that work over to INCB, which had it. It has evolved up to a certain extent, and I think the idea is that if we want to take it now, as you're saying, to a compulsory kind of framework, that would be very well within the conventions and the mandates of INCB to execute something like that. But it would need to follow the appropriate channels through the INCB's consultative mechanism, where all the member states are exploring that, because that really is something beyond. We have 149 countries here, but now you're talking about the full UN membership that really needs to consider that and then follow the appropriate channels to make it come to life.
think you're on mute, Brian.
You're muted, Brian.
So sorry. I was going to say, if there are no more comments, I'd like to move to the next sub-working group so we don't run out of time to hear the other co-chairs. So we have from Australia, Anthony Conway, and from Fiji, Esili Nadolo. I'm going to resume the recording now, and I will resume the recording and invite our sub-working group co-chairs for 1.2 to present their reports and recommendations. Thank you.
Well, Esili, are you online? I'm happy for you to speak first. Maybe not. So I'll make the remarks on behalf of sub-working group 1.2. Look, it's been a very eventful 6 months. I commenced as co-chair in November and stepped off with the November sessions. I don't know if you want to put up the PowerPoint that sets out sessions for everyone. But in November, we had some really informative presentations from the UNODC Scientific and Forensic Services team about tools that can be utilised by participating countries. Key outcomes of our November meetings were enhanced awareness of participant countries on what chemicals are currently being trafficked for the use in synthetic drug manufacture. And it provided participant countries with summaries of internationally scheduled precursor chemicals. We had some really good discussions around participant countries being able to engage with local legislator to ensure these chemicals are scheduled locally are a really important tool for our ability to combat the trafficking of synthetic drugs. We also in November had presentations on the exploitation of the general aviation sector by transnational organised crime group. Key outcomes were a real understanding of the threat environment and awareness of how this sector is being exploited by these groups, a lack of effective controls, intelligence and awareness. And certainly we all agreed that there is a need for greater international coordination in relation to that sector. Come December, the working groups focused around enhancing cross-border operations and or international operations. We had some really good presentations from the UNODC regional office from Southeast Asia, where we talked about what was going on in Southeast and East Asia, particularly trafficking routes and use of the Border Liaison Officer Network. Key outcomes of our December meetings were enhanced awareness of participant countries of the regional threat environment across East and Southeast Asia regarding trafficking routes of synthetic drugs, the ASEAN Border Management Cooperation Roadmap and the Border Liaison Officer Network. As a group, we acknowledge the need to foster stronger cooperation between countries in different internal agencies through joint training, exercising, memorandums of understanding and enforcement operations. And we acknowledge the need to enhance our information sharing practices. In January, we had some really good discussions around and briefings around civil society engagement, university engagement and private sector engagement and the requirement of participant countries to really bring on board these groups, and we all acknowledge that it's not just a law enforcement treatment for the trafficking of drugs. To really effectively combat these transnational organised crime groups, we need to lean into engagement with each of these three particular groups. We also in January received a presentation from the UNODC Global Program on Cybercrime, specifically in relation to the disrupting and seizing of digital assets, cryptocurrency used in the online trafficking of synthetic drugs. It was really informative for participant jurisdictions to hear about the emerging threat, how the UNODC Global Program on Cybercrime is assisting with threat analysis, capacity building, and the early warning system, and one of those has flown into one of the recommendations that we'll discuss in a moment. We also had a great presentation from the WCO on their K9 capability and the Mail Channel Initiative. We talk about advancements in technology in fighting international drug trafficking, but the reality is, particularly through the international mail stream, the K9 and use of K9 is still proving the most effective form of detection. So it's acknowledged amongst participating countries the value in that K9 capability and the need to develop that capability in jurisdictions that may not have access to that capability, particularly operating within international mail reception centres in countries and in transit around the globe. Look, noting the time, I probably want to summarise to the group really the overall themes that have come out of each of the monthly meetings within the trafficking sub-working group. I think we would all agree that across the participation countries there is what has been achieved through these meetings is a greater understanding of the threat environment with regard to the global trafficking of not just precursor chemicals, but also synthetic drugs, and identification of key areas that need focus or key regions of focus that affect us all, particularly countries or what I refer to as consumer countries as opposed to transit countries or manufacture countries. We've accepted that there is a need to actively share contemporary intelligence around trafficking methodologies and routes, and an acknowledgement that we need to establish greater bilateral arrangements to effectively share that intelligence, real-time sharing of that intelligence to ensure effective law enforcement treatments. And certainly across the last 6 months, we acknowledge that there is a great need for collaboration and cooperation with regard to not just cross-border operations, but international operations with regard to the combating the trafficking of synthetic drugs. And we had a really great presentation from Interpol and some good discussions about their global operation in 2024, which we will discuss next in our recommendations. Look, again, I compliment Brian and his team, and also Rainier from the UNODC in getting together some really good presenters, which were able to identify key themes and open up some really good discussions. Certainly, from my perspective as a chair, at times I felt there could have been more contribution during the meetings. However, I acknowledge that outside of those meetings there were conversations that were occurring, and there were also engagement with the US State Department outside of the actual scheduled meetings, which has resulted in some really good recommendations being put forward. So that's it from me. If we want to move on to the recommendations, Brian, are you happy to go through those, or do you want me to go through them?
You're free to read them if you'd like. Yes, if we can go to the next screen. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my view, as a co-chair, these recommendations are very straightforward. I don't see any of them being contentious, so I'll start from the top. Number 5 is to conduct reoccurring global interdiction operations targeting illicit manufacture of synthetic drugs, diversion and trafficking of chemical precursors and essential drug manufacturing equipment, trafficking organisations and their proceeds across all regions of the world. The next recommendation is support automated website scraping technology to search for the sale of synthetic drug chemicals and equipment across the internet and provide actionable intelligence to law enforcement where appropriate and in accordance with national legislation and regulations. The next recommendation is to train law enforcement to investigate use of virtual payment providers and cryptocurrencies to facilitate illicit drug trafficking, including of synthetic drugs and its precursors. And the final recommendation is to conduct reoccurring capacity building training and global operations targeting border security, port security, and air security issues, focusing on current work surrounding canines, aircraft monitoring, and synthetics in postal mail. I'll probably now open it up to either of the working group chairs or the group if they want to make any comments or ask any questions about those recommendations. Thank you very much.
And I've stopped the recording. Yes, Mr. Singh.
Yeah, regarding the first recommendation, we are open to global introduction operations, and we have been conducting control delivery operations. And in last about 3 years, we have conducted about 105 control delivery operations in India. And I would like to inform this forum that based on various inputs, we have made the biggest offshore seizure of methamphetamine, heroin, and hashish of weighing about 3,300 kilos from offshore of Gujarat in coordination with Indian Navy. So we are open to all these global interdiction operations. And regarding this capacity building and training, it goes without saying that they will go long way. And we really appreciate the efforts of the countries who are sharing their capacity building programs with us, especially US DEA, UNODC. And I think it should be continued and moved further. Thank you.
Anthony, I just want to thank you for your leadership and involvement in the subgroup into working group, and also Mason, who unfortunately couldn't stay in here from Fiji. Look, I think kind of what we've got are no-brainers in terms of the recommendations. I think the key point is, one of the things I've learned at various international conferences and things that I've been at is, when we're talking about these global interdiction operations running, what we all I think realize here now is we're really dealing with deviant globalization here. So what you've got going on here is mass production occurring across the world. We can talk about Myanmar and Mexico, but you've got it going in Afghanistan and Iran and across Africa into Europe now. You've got this mass production which is creating tonnage of products that are sitting there ready to be pushed and sold. Now, for that to really work, what you have to have is what we call these transformational brokers, and we have to have these major targets who basically pick safe havens to sit and reside in. So, recently Turkey was seen as one, Dubai is seen as one. There's other parts of the world where they'll try and get. I mean, Lebanon seems to be a one that they're quite keen on now. So, what we should be collectively thinking about, and I think this is one that we raised up, Brian, as a potential that came out from Anthony, is that improvement in an understanding of what these safe havens are, where they exist, and who it is that is residing in there. I think there's been exceptional work done by AFP with Turkey, that resulted in a lot of collaboration and building a really good relationships with Turkey about those people that were sitting inside Turkey that were driving tonnage of cocaine and methamphetamine primarily down into our part of the world. But that sort of work they've done has resulted in significant action taken by Turkey. And I think that's like we can do the global coalition on sort of targeting jobs because we do them forever. But I think in the area of where we want to go is we want to be identifying those key transformational brokers and sharing that information. The job we've just done with India is a classic example of identifying the Mr. Big, who I know is on the run, but that's a classic example of sharing and working collectively together. So I think they are key elements of where we need to be going, because those transformational brokers, those organizations are the ones that are driving the big stuff here, and they're the ones that we've got to continually take out. So I think absolutely 100% that is a key element to where we should be going, and the way in which we share information and intelligence and collectively working together. So I think we all agree these recommendations are great. They certainly fit in with what we want to achieve. We're very keen on that Interpol sort of global, coalition program of work that they want to do. I think if I give an example of where this has been absolutely stunning, has been the recent work done by AFP and through the FBI and the establishment of the Operation ANOM piece of work, which was basically creating an encrypted application that suckered organised crime across the world to basically use it to basically push tonnage of drugs. That was phenomenal. I think 27 countries got involved in that. That was phenomenal. And those are the sorts of things that we need to all be engaged in now if we're going to have an actual impact on these groups. So that was just my 5 cents worth.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in, I know we're at the end of our time. Greg, I loved what you said about the coalition serving as a space to be collaborative, to share information, to align and get in sync with one another. Because it leads to my point of what I wanted to say is over the next, for our next phase of the coalition, April to August, and we're focusing on implementation, if your countries have stories, best practices, good experiences to highlight and would like to provide a presentation and be a keynote or present during one of our meetings, like please reach out to us. I'll put the email in the chat. I think we're all aware of it, syntheticscoalition@state.gov, but please reach out to us because we would love state.gov. Yeah, state.gov, please reach out to us because we would love to be able to showcase how programs are being implemented in all of coalition participant governments. Thank you.
Thank you. And noting the time, I'd just like to ask our working group co-chairs, Mr. Singh, Mr. Williams, to give your final comments for today so we can move on to the next working group session. Thank you so much.
India is committed to the global cooperation. And I think the present government is taking all the measures and promoting us to get in touch with all the global partners and promote the coalition. And in that spirit, we welcome any kind of capacity building, training programs, the real-time information exchange, working on identifying the precursors, and taking full use of this cooperation to end this menace. Thank you.
People often refer to me as passionate, which I kind of hate. But the reality is I'm actually driven, and I'm driven because I've been into the communities across New Zealand and seen the impact of synthetics and what it's doing, and it is horrific. And I think the thing that excites me is in this coalition, I think we've got the coalition of willing here who all see this and are all driven to make a change for the world. And I think that's what we want to do. I kind of sheet home to what I said to Brian, and when I first met him in Jamaica, I challenge you to go big, Brian, off the back of this initiative, right? We don't want to just do what we're already doing. We want to come out the end of this and say that we made a change for the world. And I think the exciting thing is I think we have the opportunity to do that. So that's all I want to say.
Well, thanks to both of you. Thanks to all of our sub-working group co-chairs. Very fitting conclusion to the first session of this working group meeting. I will now stop the recording and ask Cyril to give the instructions for the next session. Thank you all so much.